Hey everybody. This is actually not the topic that I'd planned for the next video in this series, but just a few days after my last Saturday video, the news broke that the Department of Education announced it would not be setting aside the accountability requirements as required by the Elementary and Secondary Education Act. This shot my blood pressure through the roof, so let's take a step back and breathe for a moment. No, I am not abandoning this topic. It's just a moment. And be honest, chances are pretty good that you need this moment just as much as I do. And I really need a moment. So, quit slouching, move your spine. Remember the cervical and sacral areas as well. Shoulders play an important part. Hold yourself more open. Straighten, release, empower. Remember that what we do matters, and that is not just a statement of responsibility, but of opportunity. Breathe in slowly, deeply, but without creating tightness. Pause, release, just as evenly. We can do this. The Elementary and Secondary Education Act was passed in 1965. It offered states financial support from the federal government, but that aid was conditional. States had to show that they were meeting the needs of students from various different population groups in order to receive the funding. The bulk of the funds fell under Title I, which provides support to schools in low-income communities. This is particularly important because local districts typically fund schools through property taxes, which means that schools in affluent districts have significantly more money, surprise, surprise, which means smaller class sizes, more field trips, larger libraries, more technology. The list goes on. And on and on. At any rate, the goal was to increase equity in education. Since the 1965 ESEA, there have been regular updates and changes. ECIA in 1981 reduced federal regulation, but 1988's ESSIA focused on school improvement and accountability, leading to the introduction of standards-based education with IASA in 1994. IASA had standards only in math and language arts, but the focus on student progress and school accountability provided the framework for No Child Left Behind in 2001. While standardized testing had existed prior to NCLB, this legislation significantly increased the requirements, mandating that states administer yearly exams in order to receive the funding. Additionally, NCLB focused much more on punishing failure than on rewarding success. The 2015 reauthorization granted some flexibility to states that implemented school accountability systems that included teacher and principal evaluations, as well as encouraging districts to collect feedback from students, staff, and community members. So, at their core, then, these pieces of legislation are about ensuring that students who present challenges, who may require more resources to educate effectively, are still effectively educated. It's not right to just let them slip through the cracks, to shrug and give up on them. And that is certainly an admirable intent. However, standardized testing has become a monstrous abomination, something along the lines of a gelatinous cube. It's big and ugly and cumbersome and devours everything in its path. Well, metaphorically anyway. On the plus side, standardized testing doesn't actually leave behind a trail of slime. However, a gelatinous cube isn't something that you have to pay for to experience. Sometimes they even drop treasure. Do students get treasure drops from standardized tests? No. Alas. No, they do not. Georgia's end-of-course exam in American literature can take up to 3 hours for students to complete. And this doesn't include time spent going over the directions with students, or getting them set up with testing materials, or troubleshooting issues with technology for the many, many students who take the online version. At the high school level, there are also state end-of-course exams required for 9th grade literature and composition, Algebra 1, geometry, coordinate algebra, analytic geometry, biology, physical science, U.S. history, and economics. I have yet to fathom how suffering through a single 3-hour exam benefits children. If you have some explanation, if there's something I'm missing, some benefit to the student, let me know in the comments, okay? Because just the thought of it angers me. And I am incredibly grateful that I teach 10th grade literature and composition, which does not have a required exam almost exclusively. I am especially glad of that this year in particular, when public schools have been told that we still have to administer state exams despite living through a global pandemic. Students are already exhausted, discouraged, demotivated, and despairing. Forcing them through these exams is hardly likely to provide encouragement and support. In his letter on behalf of the U.S. Department of Education, Ian Rosenblum writes, "To be successful once schools have reopened, we need to understand the impact COVID-19 has had on learning and identify what resources and supports students need. We must also specifically be prepared to address the educational inequities that have been exacerbated by the pandemic, including by using student learning data to enable states, school districts, and schools to target resources and supports to the students with the greatest needs. In addition, parents need information on how their children are doing. State assessment and accountability systems play an important role in advancing educational equity. Let me be as clear and direct as possible. I support all of these goals, and all of them can be reached without putting students through hours and days of standardized testing. Do politicians really think that teachers don't let parents know how their children are doing? And even if that's the case, do they really think that a packet of data from a standardized exam the child took months before is going to be more useful to parents than feedback received from an actual human being who had contact with their child? And if the answer to both of those questions is yes, do they realize what a slap in the face that is to every teacher in this country? You want to find out what impact COVID-19 has had on learning? You want to know what resources and support students need? Ask them. They will tell you. In fact, the surveys developed to meet the requirements of the Every Student Succeeds Act would be a fantastic tool to accomplish that. We can absolutely achieve these goals, worthwhile goals, without adding to students' misery. I appreciate that states have the opportunity to reduce or even remove the punitive consequences for poor performance. That students whose anxiety and frustrations make it difficult, even impossible for them to do well, won't be further harmed by poor test scores. But make no mistake, the scores alone are not the problem. Forcing students to take these exams, particularly in these conditions, is a problem itself. The one glimmer of hope at the end of this long, dark tunnel is that maybe this will help us see the current adulation of big testing data for the monstrosity it truly is. Georgia State Superintendent Richard Woods sent out a statement to school systems throughout the state pointing out that, quote, "The federal requirement that 95% of students participate in assessments will be waivable." Let's be careful to note that this doesn't mean it will definitely be waived, but that the possibility is there. Additionally, the State Board of Education minimized the effect that these tests would have on students' grades. Technically, the scores will still count, but at 1/100th of a percentage point of the course average. That's probably less than a single homework assignment. And finally, Superintendent Woods says that they, quote, "have also modified the Georgia Milestones test design to reduce the amount of time students will spend participating in state testing." So hopefully the experience will be at least less wretched than it typically has been in recent years. But what made me most hopeful, I legitimately started to tear up during planning, y'all, was this sentence. Quote, "This reduction in testing time is not only during the pandemic, but will continue into future years." Now, that's incredibly non-specific, but maybe, just maybe, we can come out the other side of this experience with an educational system that is actually better. We do need assessment. We do need information and accountability. But these enormous, lengthy, miserable exams are not worth the price we pay. Not in terms of tax dollars, not in terms of instructional time lost, and absolutely not in terms of student well-being. And student well-being should be what is most important to all of us. Thanks, everybody. Bye for now.